Stun gun risk mathematics, noise probability versus tactical logic. A forensic behavioral examination of weapon choice, criminal methodology, and the implausibility of high-risk strategy. Among the details that have shaped this case, the ransom note, the DNA evidence, the architectural layout of the home, exists one that we have largely accepted without examining its internal logic. The apparent use of a stun gun on JonBenet. The evidence suggests it. The marks on her body, reddish burn-type patterns on her neck and back, are consistent with electrical device contact. Forensic pathologists have examined the autopsy report and reached conclusions about these marks. The question that defines the intruder theory rests partly on accepting that a stun gun was deployed. But we must ask a question that defies the easy acceptance of this narrative. Why would an intruder, planning to remove a child from a room in which her parents slept only floors away, choose a weapon that produces a loud electrical discharge, a weapon that creates noise, light, and sensory disruption in a silent house at night? This is the question that forensic behavioral analysis must confront. And when we examine it carefully, through the lens of criminal methodology, risk assessment, tactical logic, and the acoustic realities of electrical devices, we discover something that refocuses understanding. The choice of a stun gun, under the circumstances of this case, is not the choice of someone executing a premeditated kidnapping plan. It is a choice that suggests something different entirely. The acoustic profile of electrical devices, the problem of noise. Stun guns, electrical incapacitation devices, produce specific acoustic signatures when deployed. These are not silent weapons. When electrical current is delivered through the probes of a stun gun, the device produces an audible sound. The exact decibel level varies by model, but the range is consistent. Approximately 85 to 95 decibels of audible electrical discharge. To understand what this means in context, we must consider comparative noise levels. A normal conversation registers around 60 decibels. A vacuum cleaner registers around 70 decibels. An alarm clock registers around 80 decibels. A stun gun's electrical discharge registers in the range of 85 to 95 decibels, roughly equivalent to a loud alarm or the sound of heavy traffic. Now we must place this sound in the specific context of the Ramsey home on the night of December 25-26, 1996. The house is silent. It is approximately 12:30 a.m. to 1 a.m., the estimated time of the event based on autopsy findings. The parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, are sleeping on the 3rd floor, 2 floors above their daughter's bedroom on the 2nd floor. An intruder enters the home through an unknown route. The intruder reaches JonBenet's bedroom on the 2nd floor. At this moment, the critical choice presents itself. How will the intruder prevent the child from screaming, from alerting the parents? If the intruder chooses a stun gun, deploying it in the child's bedroom, an enclosed space with sound-reflecting walls, the device produces 85 to 95 decibels of electrical noise. This noise travels through the house. Sound does not recognize walls and doors as barriers the way we might imagine. Sound travels through walls, down hallways, up stairwells, through the acoustic pathways of a structure. The question becomes, with an 85-95 decibel electrical device deployed in a child's bedroom on an otherwise silent night, in a house where 2 adults are sleeping, what is the probability that these adults would remain asleep through that noise? The acoustic transmission problem. Sound travels upward. We must understand the physics of sound propagation through residential structures. Sound travels in all directions from its source, but certain paths present less resistance than others. In a multi-story house, sound tends to travel upward more effectively than downward. This is because of the way air circulates, the way structures transmit vibration, and the acoustic properties of open stairwells. If the 2nd floor, where the stun gun would be deployed, has an open connection to the first floor, and from there, access to stairwells leading to the third floor. Sound has a direct acoustic pathway from the source upward to the sleeping parents. The Ramsey home contained both a back stairwell and a front main stairwell, both of which provide acoustic pathways connecting the bedroom floors to the areas where the parents slept. The spiral staircase at the front of the home was described as part of the main circulation route. The back stairs provided secondary access. Both function as sound conductors in a house. When sound travels up a stairwell, a essentially hollow vertical tube, it is amplified rather than diminished. The acoustic path becomes more direct, not less. This means that a sound source in JonBenet's second-floor bedroom would travel more effectively upward to the third-floor master suite than it would travel horizontally through walls to other second-floor spaces. This is forensically significant. It means that deploying a stun gun in the second-floor child's bedroom would create a high probability of awakening the parents sleeping 2 floors above, the very outcome the intruder would be trying to prevent. The child's vocal response, the paradox of sound suppression. Let us examine the intended purpose of using a stun gun in this scenario. An intruder wants to remove a child from her bedroom without alerting the parents. The intruder cannot allow the child to scream. Electrical incapacitation is meant to prevent that scream, to subdue the child into silence or compliance. But there is a problem with this logic. A stun gun does not instantaneously render someone unconscious. What it does is cause neuromuscular incapacitation, a temporary paralysis of voluntary muscles. The person struck by the device is unable to move, unable to coordinate muscular response, often unable to speak clearly. The onset of this incapacitation is not instantaneous. There is a window of time, seconds to perhaps a minute, between the deployment of the device and full incapacitation. During this window, what is the child's response? A child struck by a stun gun experiences extreme pain, fear, and disorientation. The natural response to such stimuli is to scream. The child's protective instinct is to cry out, to vocalize distress, to alert others that something terrible is happening. So the stun gun deployment creates a paradox. The device is meant to prevent screaming, but the pain and fear caused by the device's deployment typically produces screaming. The weapon choice fails to achieve its stated purpose. It creates noise, the electrical discharge, and then produces more noise, the child's vocalization in response to pain and fear. An intruder executing a calculated plan would recognize this paradox. An experienced criminal planning to abduct a child while avoiding detection would not choose a weapon that produces both electrical noise and child vocalization. It is a choice that defeats the stated objective. Amateur versus calculated criminal behavior. The methodology question. In forensic criminology, we distinguish between amateur criminal behavior and calculated, experienced criminal behavior. The distinction often appears in weapon choice. An experienced abductor, someone who has planned this activity, researched methods, and thought through contingencies, would select tools that minimize risk and maximize control. Such a person might choose chemical incapacitation, chloroform ether, that acts quickly and leaves minimal physical evidence of force. Pharmaceutical sedation that produces sleep-like unconsciousness without pain or vocalization. Manual strangulation combined with gagging, both of which prevent vocalization. Other methods that prevent the child from screaming. The stun gun choice, by contrast, seems almost reckless in its risk profile. It creates noise. It produces pain that typically results in the child's vocalization. It requires the child to be conscious enough to transport. An unconscious child might not move, complicating movement through the house. It leaves electrical burns, physical evidence of the use of force. A calculated criminal would not make this choice. An experienced abductor would not deploy a device that creates multiple risk factors simultaneously. But what if the stun gun was not chosen by a calculated, premeditated intruder? What if it was chosen by someone acting in the moment, someone for whom this was not a premeditated abduction scenario, but an improvised response to an immediate crisis? In that case, the weapon choice takes on different meaning. It becomes evidence not of calculated criminal planning, but of someone accessing whatever tool was available in a moment of desperation or panic. It becomes evidence of crisis management, not premeditation. The proximity problem, parental position and hearing capacity. We must place the parents specifically in relation to the child's bedroom. The Ramsey home was constructed with a third-floor master suite, converted attic space, in which John and Patsy Ramsey were sleeping. JonBenet's bedroom was on the second floor, directly below them or nearly so. The vertical distance, 2 floors with basement level below that, is approximately 20-25 feet of open air, plus walls and floor structures. In a modern residential construction, this distance does not provide acoustic insulation. Parents regularly wake to sounds from their children's rooms transmitted through floors and walls. An 85-95 decibel electrical discharge in JonBenet's bedroom at 12:31 WAM, with the house otherwise silent, would create a sound profile that penetrated through floor structures. Combined with the child's vocal response to the pain of electrical shock, the acoustic signature would be substantial. Yet John and Patsy reported not waking. They reported sleeping through the night, unaware of any disturbance. This raises a question. How could an 85-95 decibel electrical device discharge in a child's bedroom, 2 floors below the sleeping parents, combined with the child's emotional and vocalized response to that device, occur without awakening the parents? One answer. The parents were not asleep. They knew about the event as it was occurring. Another answer. The stun gun deployment occurred in a different configuration than the intruder theory describes. Perhaps the device was used in the basement, not the bedroom, where sound would travel differently. Perhaps it was used while the child was already removed from the bedroom, eliminating the problem of bedroom to third-floor sound transmission. A third answer. The stun gun explanation, while supported by physical evidence, the marks, is not consistent with the scenario of an unknown intruder, removing a child from her bedroom while parents sleep undisturbed 2 floors above. The acoustic reality, testing the narrative. Court documents note an important point. The parties agree that a stun gun could be used and not heard in other rooms of a house. This statement acknowledges the acoustic complexity. A stun gun could be used and not heard in other rooms, if those rooms are sufficiently insulated, if doors are closed, if the sound-reflecting properties of the room absorb rather than transmit sound. But other rooms is different from the room 2 floors below where the parents sleep, in a house with open stairwells and connected acoustic pathways. The agreement that a stun gun could be used and not heard does not address the specific architecture of the Ramsey home, the specific time, when the house is silent, the specific proximity, 2 floors directly below, or the specific response of a child struck by such a device. It is the agreement that glosses over the specific, forensic questions that must be asked. The criminal psychology of weapon selection. What does choice reveal? When a person commits a crime, their choice of tools, methods, and timing reveals something about their psychological state, their premeditation, and their knowledge. An intruder who is a calculated, experienced criminal would know about acoustic issues, would understand sound transmission through houses, would plan for parental proximity, would choose tools that minimize risk. An intruder who deploys a high-decibel electrical device in a child's bedroom while parents sleep nearby is either inexperienced and not thinking through the acoustic implications, desperate and acting without full planning, not actually an intruder executing a premeditated plan. The third possibility, that the person deploying the stun gun wasn't an unknown intruder executing a kidnapping plan, reshapes understanding of the event. It suggests someone with access to the home, someone who knew the parents might wake but accepted that risk, someone who was not executing a calculated abduction plan but responding to an immediate situation. The staging question: did the physical evidence precede the narrative? This brings us to a critical forensic question. Did the stun gun marks on JonBenet's body lead to the narrative that an intruder used a stun gun to abduct her from her bedroom? Or was the narrative of intruder abduction constructed first, and the physical evidence, the marks, then interpreted as consistent with that narrative? The distinction matters. If the marks appeared first, and investigators worked backward to construct a theory of their causation, we are engaged in legitimate forensic analysis. The marks exist. We are determining their cause. But if the narrative was constructed first, an unknown intruder breaks in, takes the child, uses a stun gun to keep her quiet, and then the marks were interpreted as supporting this narrative, we are engaging in confirmation bias. We are finding evidence that fits the story we have already decided must be true. The marks on JonBenet's body are real. They are documented in the autopsy. They are consistent with stun gun contact. But the explanation for how those marks came to be on her body is not determined solely by the marks themselves. The marks could have been made by someone with access to the home, deploying a device in a different scenario entirely than the intruder abduction narrative. The behavioral pattern. What fits and what does not? A calculated intruder executing a premeditated kidnapping would not choose a loud weapon that risks awakening the parents, would have a specific plan for what happens after subduing the child, would have an escape route prepared, would minimize risk at every stage, would not leave the child in the home, gagged, bound, and hidden. Someone in crisis, someone responding to an accident or an immediate situation, might grab whatever tool was available, might use it, without fully thinking through acoustic consequences, might leave the child in the house because the plan was never to remove her, might stage the scene afterward to create a narrative that protects them. When we examine the actual evidence, the child found in the basement, the elaborate ransom note, the rope, the gagging, the ligatures, we see a scenario that does not match the acoustic profile of a stun gun being deployed in a bedroom with parents sleeping floors away. We see evidence that suggests a different sequence of events entirely. The unexamined acoustic problem, the problem no one wants to address. The stun gun evidence has been largely accepted without rigorous examination of its acoustic implications. Experts have testified about the marks. Researchers have studied stun gun injury patterns. But few have asked the simple question: given the acoustic profile of this device, the configuration of this house, and the proximity of the sleeping parents, how is it physically plausible that a stun gun was deployed in the child's bedroom at night without waking the parents? The answer might be that it is not plausible. It might be that the stun gun was used, but in a different scenario than the one publicly presented. Or it might be that the marks on the child's body, while consistent with stun gun contact, were caused by something else entirely. And we have accepted the wrong explanation because it fit the narrative we needed to believe. What the weapon choice reveals if we listen. The stun gun is both evidence of something and evidence of something else. It is physical evidence of electrical device contact with the child's body. But it is also behavioral evidence, evidence of someone's choices, planning, or lack of planning, in a moment we have not fully understood. If the stun gun was deployed by a calculated intruder in the child's bedroom, we must explain how that deployment, loud, painful, producing vocalization, went unheard by parents sleeping. 2 floors above, in a house with acoustic pathways connecting all floors. If we cannot explain that plausibly, then the stun gun evidence points not to an unknown intruder executing a premeditated plan, but to something closer to home, to someone with access, to someone for whom the acoustic risk was different because the scenario was different, to someone who may have used the device in a different context than we have been told. The weapon choice is not the smoking gun that proves innocence or guilt, but it is a thread that, when pulled, unravels the narrative in ways we have not fully acknowledged, because a calculated criminal would not make this choice. But someone in crisis, someone improvising, someone acting without full planning, someone with access to the home, might. And that difference changes everything.
Okay, so let's take a step back and let me jump in here. Here's the discrepancy that I'm dealing with. When we work through this, we see this idea that we wonder again why, if it was a stun gun, why an intruder in this JonBenet Ramsey case, when trying to abduct JonBenet, would use a stun gun to sort of try to incapacitate her. JonBenet's parents, John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, are sleeping 2 floors above. Or, I'm sorry, sleeping 1 floor above. Well, no, yeah, 1 floor above, because he would be on the 2nd floor. They're sleeping 1 floor above. And I think some stun guns, at least, unless you have some sort of silencer for a stun gun, I think a lot of stun guns make a very distinct noise. I think in some cases they produce like 85 to 95 decibels of noise. It can sound like traffic. We know that in this what we say, we know that sound is going to travel upward mostly rather than downward. And so when you think about a criminal, we talked about this before, who is trying to find a way to stay silent and undetected, using something that is like 85 to 95 decibels is of the utmost importance. You got to stay away from that. So to make the point, using a stun gun might actually sound good at first, but it actually might be pretty problematic. And you sort of question whether or not the intruder would even use, a smart intruder would even use that. The intruder would also need to know that the stun gun is pretty loud. You know, to think about taking a stun gun in a house to use on someone, especially a child, and to assume, and I'm quite frankly, I'm surprised at how someone could get away with such an explanation. I'm quite baffled, because if you're like, oh, you know, they must have used a stun gun on him and it knocked him out. You know, honestly, from all the research that I've done, I've tried to look and see, like, do stun guns, like, would they knock a child out? Like, I'm trying to understand that. I can't find anywhere off the top of my head that I remember in my research. I can't find anywhere where a stun gun would incapacitate a child. I can't find it. And so, like, you're using a stun gun. They're not silent, or you're trying to, or that you're proposing that this is the case. They're not silent. They're loud. Like, to put it in perspective, it's like, from what I can tell, they're loud as a vacuum cleaner or an alarm clock. If an alarm clock or a vacuum cleaner, if a vacuum cleaner starts, don't you think you'd wake up in the middle of the night? And also, I guess it also depends on how quick the sound comes and goes, and whether how deep in sleep the John and Patsy are, and all such as that. But I guess I just struggle because Patsy talks about being familiar with the sounds of the house. She's up on the first floor and she hears the sort of the buzzing of the house, the humming and the this and the that of the house, with the just the natural. I think she mentioned the sewer. I don't know if it was a sewer line, but just the sort of like the settling of the house at nighttime or something like that. She also mentioned hearing, sort of remember or being able to hear the noises in Burke's fish tank. Now, this is what is throwing me, because I know fish tanks can be loud, but, and somebody made this point, you would really have to question whether or not John and Patsy were being intimate, because it's like, how can you, if Patsy can hear all the way down to Burke's room, because Burke has the door partially closed. If she can hear all the way down to Burke's room, because it's right there, but if she can hear down there, down a flight of steps, to hear his fish tank humming, I guess that's my concern. Because I was trying to find, okay, if you're telling me that stun guns can be, I think what we have here, like between 85 and 95 decibels. That's like traffic. That's like a vacuum cleaner. Okay. That's noticeable, but they can get as high as like 100 to 120. I think somewhere I saw it, 120 decibels. Like, that's painfully loud. But I think the decibel range of like a normal conversation is like 60 decibels. Okay. I think the lowest one that I saw was like the buzzing sound, especially if you put it to a human, like they're suggesting that, okay, well, maybe what if they like directly made contact with JonBenet, and wouldn't that dampen the sound? From what I can tell, they said it, probably dampen it probably like, oh, this is okay, cool. It would dampen it probably like 51 decibels. And that's just below like 9 decibels below like what it sounds like a normal conversation. So what you're probably going to be hearing is like the sound of like a running refrigerator or something like that, or just like the sounds of the house or whatever. And so that makes sense. So it's possible that John or Patsy could have heard it, but they thought it was like, maybe a sound of a refrigerator or something like that. Okay. I will give that to you. I will concede that. But the result of such a thing, especially at close range, from what I can tell, I'm not seeing where a stun gun would incapacitate a child. And that's where we get the involuntary, and that's why I said on another video or something like that, on another analysis that I did, the screaming would be involuntary. The reaction of JonBenet would be involuntary, right? There would be no knockout. That's what we've been told. Oh, it would have knocked her out. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm wrong, and that's okay. But help me be wrong, because the stun gun would have, as far as I could tell, stun gun would have, from what I can see here, would have caused excruciating pain and involuntary muscle spasms. A child's natural physiological response to such intense sudden pain is a loud involuntary scream. So I asked about, like, would it be silent? So from what I can tell, unlike, and this is what I can see, unlike in the movies, stun guns do not cause instant unconsciousness. The victim remains awake and capable of vocalizing. Even if their vocal cords are momentarily affected by muscle contractions, the intense pain usually results in immediate loud vocal distress once contact is broken or even during contact. So when we think about the audibility for a parent, sort of like screaming, a child's scream can reach probably 100 to 120 decibels, which is loud enough to be heard through the walls and the floors. Stun guns can also cause sort of like this physical commotion, unsupported falls. If JonBenet is kind of standing there, you would have to quickly catch her. And I mean quickly. So that means you would have had to, if you're going to do it, you would have had to have picked her up and then used it. Because if she was standing there in front of you and you used it, she would have probably fell and hit the floor, and you would have heard a boom, boom. Definitely would have heard that. And and it's important because we're talking about sort of like these involuntary sounds that it's not just one isolated sound, right? You hear a hum going through the house and you're like, oh, that's in your sleep. You're like, oh, that's weird. Because Patsy is already a light sleeper. Oh, that's weird. I'm not used to that sound, but who knows what it is? We'll let it bypass. But you hear this strange sound that you're not used to, accompanied by a thump or something like that, and you're like, you're up, your eyes are open. Even if you're still laying in bed, your eyes are open. But then your eyes are open, you will hear a yelp. You'll hear it. And then you'll kind of throw your cover off and be like, wait, what? That's what I'm saying. That's the problem. So, because children have less muscle mass and physical maturity, the use of such devices is significantly riskier and can cause permanent physical or emotional damage. If anything, it's possible, I think, from what it's saying here, is that it can lead to the passing away of a child. And you would in this case, you might even put the child at risk for some cardiac issues, especially somebody at her size. So, again, I don't know how this theory passed through. You know what I mean? I don't know how, because it would seem to me that if this was used on JonBenet, she's 45 pounds. Barely even 4 feet. She's little. She's tiny. Do you think her body could have withstood something like this? All of these things that could happen to her as a result of because we're not talking about at a distance, like boom, at maybe 5 feet or something like that. Because we're not even talking about to the back or to the stomach. We're talking about to the neck at close range. All of these issues that would sort of like incapacitate or possibly physically or even cause death. That is a harsh mechanism to use. And I would be hesitant as an intruder to use something like that on a child. That sounds to me like it's careless. That's a careless recommendation to consider. Oh, what about the stun gun? Man, get that bull crap out of here. Ain't nobody using no stun gun on no child, man. That stun gun would cause more damage than it's worth. If you're trying to get her back, you already have, if you're trying to give her back, you already have damaged goods. That's not what we want to do. At most, we're just trying to, you know what I mean? We're just trying to get her quiet. Tape. You have tape in your backpack. Get a tape and a sock. If you want to use movies like in the ransom note, do that. Tape and a sock. Put the sock in to cover it and put the tape over her mouth. Done deal. But that's what I'm saying. Nothing makes sense. Even when they did use the tape wasn't even on there right. Gotta be kidding me. This is nonsense. Why would a criminal even use this? Because you cause all of the possible damages that you could cause to this 6-year-old child. I'm trying to get money for her, and I give her back. I'm not doing that. I give her back damaged. That's not my intent. My intent, and that's what I'm saying. What's going on here? What is this criminal doing? What is this? They do got a problem with JonBenet or they don't. That's the discrepancy. You got a problem with the girl or you don't. You got a problem with John or you don't. Because it seems like you got a problem with her. Because why would you bring such force talking about a rope? She's 6. She can't fight you. Who's she going? 2 grown men? Come on, man. Come on. 2 grown men with something to lose in the house. If JonBenet fought back, there would be some shuffling, especially in her own house. Somebody would hear it. And that's what we talk about when we talk about Burke being across the hallway with his door open. Somebody would hear something. And you know how nosy Burke is. He got to know everything. So he probably would get up. Burke don't need nothing to wake him up. Burke gets up on his own. Just because he wants to be awake. He's a kid. And he's like 9 years old at the time at that. Of course I'm getting up in the middle of the night to go play with toys. That's probably not the first time he's done that. Burke probably did that all the time. Easy. So that's what I'm saying, man. This don't smell right to me. This is fishy. I don't even think you can use a stun gun. Because it's too loud. It's too damaging. And it's going to cause her to yell. You wouldn't even use that. Take it off the table. Take it off the table. All right. Get my point. Take it easy.